We are ready. All right, well, we'll begin our Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for October 24th. Get it underway, and our first point of business, and basically only point of business, is to approve our brief minutes from our last meeting on September 26th. If you took about 5.5 seconds and reviewed it, I would venture to accept a motion to approve unless you see something that needs some attention. Second. Go ahead and call roll if you would, Megan. Oh, there we go.
Wim Oaks.
Here.
Aye. Trevor Branch. Jeff Garrison.
Aye.
Hadley Goldberg.
I noticed a quick grammar error, sorry, so Brooks spelled wrong. I don't know if that's something you need to revote on, but I just noticed Brooks is missing an E.
Oh, you're right.
Sorry, I don't know if that's something you need to revote on, or is that just? Okay,
No.
Sorry.
I think
Might
it'll be all right.
I did not recognize that.
Nope, that's good to know. Alexi Pavlov.
Aye.
Lacey Colbert is absent. Pete Renfro.
Aye.
You guys have it.
Very good, thank you. Just moving right on down, we have no scheduled visitors or guests, no unfinished or new business. But we will begin a discussion. I'll turn it over to Cameron for the recap of the highlights of the meeting. Was anyone able to attend? I wasn't, because I had a boogered up fender.
Yep.
Okay.
Came,
Good.
had a really good turnout.
Steve was impressed that we had some.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I was going to be there, but
Yeah, you messaged me.
had a car wreck, so I didn't get all that.
His personal visitor is like a school bid.
Yes. I will turn it over to you, Cameron.
Yeah, so on September 30th, the city had a board retreat with the Board of Aldermen. So most departments presented to the board. In your packet, you've got copies of the presentations. I will not go through those in detail. We'll kind of quickly run through some slides. When we get to our section, I'll slow down a little bit to kind of mention some of the details. If you have any questions about these, I don't think I can answer everything tonight, but I'd be happy to try to reach out and get some additional information. Overall, great turnout on the 30th. Our entire department was there for a briefing minute to present or to introduce those to the board. And they were highly appreciative of that. And then again, the commission, great turnout from the commission. But just moving forward, the first presentation was the police department. Their primary focus was talking about recruitment, retention of officers. As always, there's always a shortage of officers, and there's always a kind of a struggle with hiring those and being competitive with surrounding communities in the pay. So they're kind of making some focus on currently where they're at with the officers, proposed officers, and where they need to be in the coming years. This also is in conjunction with the vote coming up in November. They hit on some of the current staffing, some of the retention of the officers. Right now, they had 33 sworn officers or vacancies. They talked about the stabilization steps of going through the process. Salary comparison, they did do a comparison with surrounding communities, and as you see, Ozark is one of the lowest in the areas. Briefly mention the incentives and benefits package, recruitment incentive, education incentive. They did highlight some of the certifications that the officers do have and what degrees they do have. Physical fitness incentive, longevity incentive, shift differential. There is a differential on shift as far as pay. Generally, those overnight shifts are a little higher in pay. They did talk about the shortage of officers nationwide and why there is that shortage. Like most professions, there seems to be a shortage in today's world. And with that, we'll move on into the law department. Legal considerations for development Ozark. So our city attorney, Amanda Calloway, she did present similar presentation that she has given to the commission in the past regarding annexation, zoning, and platting. So again, just kind of briefly highlight those. She went over the planning law in the United States, kind of how that started and what it became of today's times. How property is developed, going over the annexation, zoning, and subdividing of land. Again, going through the steps of annexation, legal considerations, and other factors as you consider annexing property into the city limits of Ozark. Zoning, trying to balance the neighboring uses with the proposed uses in the comprehensive plan and what you should look at during the zoning applications. And then kind of the final step of that is platting, so where you get into the detail of what's going to happen on that property as far as splitting, dividing, utilities, infrastructure, and uses. She did highlight on the planning tiers. As you all know, there's an urban service area for the city of Ozark that's in agreement with Christian County. Nix is also part of that agreement. So planning tier 1, we've further divided into 1A, B, and C. That's generally the properties that are compact contiguous with the city limits of Ozark or have utilities right on the property or near the boundaries of that property. So when development happens in tier 1, for the most part, if they go to the county and it's in the county in the tier 1 area, generally those you might assume will be coming in the city for annexation and zoning. Chances are they'll have to develop in the city. Tier 2 is kind of the yellow shaded area, kind of between the pink and the green blue areas. That's kind of those areas that we kind of got to make a best guess with future development, when we think it might come into the city and what's going on. Some cases they may annex pretty quickly, or it may be significant amount of time before they can be annexed in the city. And then tier 3 is just the long-term, the area in pink is the long-term planning of development. And then again, working with the county continually with an understanding that, hey, when you see development, let's evaluate those as they come about. The tier 1, as I mentioned, that we did break that down into further. And those are basically if there are compact contiguous, if they're donuts in the middle of the city, if the utilities are there, maybe they are already getting water and sewer, but yet they're still in the county. So those are generally, for the most part, would be immediately annexed as soon as something would happen.
Cameron?
Yep.
I think I did that. County property that is accessing city water and city sewer, or one or the other.
Mhm.
Do they pay an uptick?
The rate for those is 1.5 times. And how to try to encourage them to come and we to them, hey, you'll pay a higher price. But if there's some reason they don't need to, in a lot of cases it may be a septic or the well is failing and they got to get immediate access.
Right.
They generally would choose to not come in the city, and for the most part these are residential properties. Commercial by all means will be in the city just because they need the services.
Right.
But yeah, when they're outside city limits, they do pay a 1.5 times the water and sewer rates.
Okay.
Yep.
The Ozark Special Road District, is that tied in with the city as well? I know you always seem like when we have the snow on the roads, like there's people that like, oh, they pull up there and they don't pay the city things. They're not part of the city, but is that kind of tied in with that?
Not necessarily with that. There are Ozark Special Road Districts within the city and outside the city. I'm not sure exactly how that tax is collected on those. But I imagine if you live inside the city, there's an additional tax that you'd pay to the city, not necessarily just for Ozark Special. But yeah, they are intermingling in the city and outside the city as well.
Okay, thanks.
And then Amanda kind of got into more details about what you can do moving forward, about if there's some concerns about a zoning request or what they might be doing on that property. We do have an ordinance in place as the commission board approved back in 2020, the conditional overlay ordinance. Basically, that's an ordinance that takes the straight zoning and you can apply additional criteria. Generally, that's a direction staff is giving to the applicant. So what we're doing in this case was just asking the board, and same to commission, if you know of things moving forward in the future that you'd like to see that may be in certain situations, or examples that you might want to see additional buffer yards, landscaping, a reduction of height, increased setbacks, depending on the neighboring uses. That's something we can consider and look into for the applications. Again, you referenced the comprehensive plan. Just additionally encouraging the participation in reviewing the comprehensive plan. If we need to make amendments, and we'll look at making those amendments for development. Neighborhood meetings. I don't know if this may have came through for most of you guys who are on the commission, but we did approve by the commission a neighborhood meeting ordinance. However, it was tabled at the board and was never taken off the table. That ordinance is requiring any application come to the city for the most part of annexing, zoning, plating, would have a neighborhood meeting outside the city, so they can kind of get some feedback from the neighboring property owners. Very similar to a process in Springfield.
Can you elaborate on why it was tabled?
There was just concerns of who should attend those meetings, the concerns of what could occur during those meetings, if the applicant was going to be honest with the findings of those meetings. So just several different things that just came across the board, just wasn't comfortable with getting that approval in place at this time. However, I think it's something that we'll be probably bringing forward to them again soon to reconsider that. Again, just kind of talking about some of the past claims and the processes going through for any legal action. And then moving on, so our section, the Planning and Development Department, just kind of going through some of our slides here. We did an introduction of the team. Cindy Venable is our Planning Development Technician. She's on the left of the photo. Myself in the back. Denny Hall, he's our Building Inspector. Linnell Baca, Planning Development Coordinator. Alan Stillings is our Code Compliance Officer. And then you all know Megan Bischoff, our City Planner. We are a team of 6. Yep.
Yeah.
We briefly went over with the board on some, we get a lot of questions about codes and requirements. And so we're highlighting where you can find these on the website. So the easiest way that I can find, and you can find them in several places, but if you just go to the main page, go to the Doing Business of Ozark, and it drops down the menu and you can see the city code link. So in that city code, you can go there and browse the codes. Most of those are the codes that you have in your black book, or I guess all of those are the codes in your black book. So if you ever have any questions, or by all means, you can reach out to us with questions, but you can always refer to that code. Our department primarily handles the Title 4 or Chapter 4 of the codes. That's where you find most of the codes regarding the commission and board composition, the zoning regulations, economic development, signs, subdivision regulations, floodplain management, and then some of the codes that will apply to our department and public works for stormwater and erosion control. In addition, following that is Title 5 is the building construction code. This is where the city adopts the IBC, the International Building Code, and the IRC, the International Residential Code. Those are usually found in that section, along with any amendments that is made in those adoptions. And then the last section is code enforcement or code compliance. That'll jump around from several chapters, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 600. There's several chapters in there that'll apply to our department for our code compliance officer. We see a lot of most of our code compliance will be regarding tall grasses, non-operable vehicles, and then just debris to be cleaned up. We did briefly talk about single family, multifamily zoning districts, several trends going around the US that we have found in our research. There's always a housing shortage, it seems like, and a lack of affordable housing. So that's a concern nationwide. Addressing missing middle, and that is something mentioned in the comprehensive plan, but addressing that area between the higher end apartments versus the single family, but that middle in between properties. Even ran across in some cases where some municipalities are considering eliminating single family zoning districts just because of the concerns that they are bringing forth in the housing shortage and affordable housing. I don't see that happening here anytime soon, but that is something that's interesting to see. They are finding that single family does result in causing segregation. So that's something that through the planning world are looking at kind of address. Embracing accessory dwelling units is something we brought forward through a single family zoning amendment. I will say that that has been removed as we've been trying to get that approved through the board. Right now, it doesn't look like the city is going to pursue the accessory dwelling units. Reducing minimum lot size, that's a national trend going around. Manufactured homes, that's something else that's coming back as utilizing manufactured homes to help offset the affordable housing concerns. The NIMBYs, the not in my backyards, and removing emotions from making decisions. Again, that's a nationwide concern that occurs everywhere. Flexible land use, that's something that we've been actively trying to look into and work on, is providing some flexibility. The recent general mixed use ordinance is an example of that. And then most recent is the Housing Supply and Affordability Act that was created. I don't know a lot about that, but that is an act that was recently created in the federal regulations that will be moving forward. In our research, we referred a lot to the American Planning Association, a lot of articles here that were referenced. Again, same thing that we've been seeing conveying is happening US wide. New York Times, and then our own Springfield Business Journal, even locally in the Springfield Business Journal, they've made a few articles recently related to planning and the housing concerns. We have a current residential market analysis that was completed in 2015 by PGAV planners. We had reached out to them about updating that analysis, and it was just interesting to see the response about, hey, the market seems to be changing, and not going to read it there word for word, but if you read that quote, I mean, basically what they're saying that they're seeing is exactly what we've been conveying in the recent months about the concerns of single family housing, the shortage of housing, the missing middle of creating some more multifamily housing, and then just the number of folks looking to downsize.
Mhm.
Again, mention that the comprehensive plan, it does mention this missing middle that is in there. Missing middle opportunities. The past, the concerns have been what these will look like. I think the examples over the course of history doesn't show that we've had the greatest examples of these, but they can creatively blend in with single family. In a lot of cases, these just look like large single family structures. So there are ways that we can further encourage this. Maybe we can look at amending some ordinances to require some design criteria or features that we may be looking for that would better support these applications moving forward. I will say that we haven't had this strong support moving forward through these applications for a lot of multifamily. Townhomes and then live work units is something I think we'll start seeing more and more. We are seeing requests for those now. Future land use map, that's one thing we've addressed with the board a couple times. By all means, we are happy to sit down with any of you all to look at this map to see if we need to make, we know staff wise, there are several changes that we need to make. We just get to those, but moving forward and seeing the growth of the city, or what kind of land uses we'd like to see throughout the city. Something that's been coming up lately a lot are landscape buffers. I'm not sure why, but it's becoming a topic for most applications. Back to that conditional overlay, landscape buffers are something we can look into. So we took the opportunity to kind of define those and further clarify those with the Board of Aldermen, what those really mean. In some cases, in our ordinance, we already have those, or in there. When you have the proposed use of what you're proposing against the neighboring existing use, there are the buffer requirements. And as you get more intense with the proposed to the neighboring, it does increase those requirements. So again, we just highlighted those that are in the ordinance. And buffer yard A is 15 feet in width with some vegetation requirements and no fence. Buffer yard B is one of our most common. That's a 25 foot in width, some additional vegetation, does require a fence. And then C is the most extreme intense buffer yard, 40 feet in width with a fence and some additional plantings. So to kind of give you an example of those. So if you got a single family next to a single family, there's no buffer yard. When you have two family or two family uses next to single family, then it becomes a buffer yard A. So it kind of starts that stepping of those intensities. Multifamily to single family, buffer yard B. Same with commercial, and then the high intense uses of industrial, office warehousing, that's where you get into the C. And so you kind of take the chart and step it around or look at it around the chart to see where you need those buffer yards. And it doesn't matter if it's already on the other side of the property. This is on your side of the property. And if that property neighboring it develops, they have to do the buffer yard as well. So it's on both sides of the property generally. So then just to depict the number of trees within 100 foot of property. So you see buffer yard A is pretty sparse. We always try to give credit for vegetation there. A lot of cases are fences there. So we'll give credit on those on the other buffer yards. But then step into buffer yard C, it starts to get a little more dense. Trying to depict these at more of a mature size. Going in, we know it's going to take some time. That's why the fence is usually required, is because it's immediate effect while the trees and vegetation are maturing. And then buffer yard C, again, it's intended to look like a fairly significant dense, almost a forest-like look to help segregate or separate those two uses. So kind of going through those with the board, understanding those buffer yards. The department has seen growth. It doesn't seem like we're that busy because we don't have a lot of walk-in traffic anymore, but that's due to our online permitting services. And we're 24/7. But I will say in the last few years, we have seen a substantial increase. We did take a dip in 2020 with the pandemic findings, but 2021 we're at 231 at the end of the year with our major permits of new residential, single family, commercial, and industrial. This doesn't include all the permits. We're usually about that 600 range total. But you see, we ended 231, 2021. And then as of September 12, 2020, we're at 171. We project that we'll be exceeding those numbers again this year. So yes, clicking along, seeing a lot of permitting and a lot of growth in the city. Revenues being brought in from the fees collected from the permitting. You kind of see we project that last year we were at 284. We'll project that we'll exceed 300,000 this year with just those primary fees or permits that we see coming in. So we are a department of five to six staff members. We fluctuated over the past 5 years. Currently, we're at 6 staff members. Since I've been here, we have not really changed the total number of people. We've stayed a consistent 5 to 6 people. So that's been since 2017. We have greatly improved our efficiency with our permitting software, reduces a lot of copy costs, printing costs, storage space. It allows us to quickly turn around with the applicants and convey information to them on a 24/7 basis. They can go in and make application at any time. One of the big things that will help do is reduce our storage needs. Right now, the department is looking at doing a remodel over on Brick Street. And one of the big areas that we need is storage space for our documentation. We have it stored at Quail Run facility, which is an off-site facility, and upstairs here at City Hall. So yeah, the electronic software will reduce a lot of that paper need. And then just moving forward, we are looking to try to grow the department, adding, it'd be nice to add 2 to 3 staff members in the next year, trying to increase the amount of inspections we can do in the field, reviewing of applications. We don't spend a lot of time on the applications. We source out a lot of the review through civil and architecture for our applications. So we can see and justify need for additional staff folks. And then additionally with those folks, that would help relieve some of the workload. Also, we can further evaluate the growth of the city, the ordinance needs, the research needs that we need to be doing as the city grows and projecting that economic development growth. And that was the end of the planning and zoning section, and I'll just continue flipping on to the rest of the departments. One of the big topics through Public Works was the water supply, water shortage, and working with surrounding communities to help address that in the upcoming 10, 20, 30 years down the road. But you probably saw an article come out in the last week, I believe, about conserve water, and that is one of the concerns on the north side of town. Is just our aquifer up there is kind of dropping a little bit. So population trends, they did use some information from OTO, which is looking at kind of the development housing markets. We do continue to see a lot more growth on the north side of town. kind of shows those hot spots, kind of in the northern side of town here. This larger area of the map is Springfield. Then you got Nixon, Ozark, but most of our growth is on the north side of town. Then just kind of flipping through. Just trying to think of that. What's that? Yep.
Yeah.
There are some recent applications for subdivision development, residential development on the south side that will help some of our growth needs or address some of the growth concerns. Looking through, trying to see if there's anything else. They did address the capital improvement projects with water sewer for future improvements for development to try to offset some of the concerns of the development on our system. They did mention kind of the treatment plant capacities, the old plant, which is the old treatment plant down behind, kind of back in there behind the Casey's and the new ambulance district down on the Finley. It's nearing its capacity. And so the Elk Valley plant, the newer plant on downstream, it's really needing more flow to help it run more efficiently. And so that southern growth and improvements on the north side of town will help address that and move a lot of the flow down to Elk Valley treatment plant. Journey. So then the next section we are working on what we call the journey for City of Ozark, and then also value stream mapping. We're trying to set up this more of the streamlined approach to someone comes in the city as an employee, or even a handout we can give to applicants to kind of show you, hey, here's the steps you go through when you receive some form of application. So they're working on trying to create these flow charts and these outlines for the staff can be given as a handover tool as they come in on as an onboarding to the City of Ozark. It's kind of an example, one of those flow charts. Our department sees a lot of these as a lot of the permits come to our department. So you'll see in a lot of cases, it'll start with the planning and development department. Just highlight departments. The city did mention about addressing possibly adding a new department. I think it's going to show up. Environmental resources, something that the city is evaluating about starting a new department of environmental resources, and evaluate that for more outdoor type development, sewer, stormwater, preserving natural environmental features. Not much more there. And then this may be the last one. The last presentation, I believe, was from the Parks Department about the sports complex study. A couple of years ago, they reached out to a firm to do a sports complex study to kind of figure out the needs of the city. Reached out to the community to get some feedback. And this is just kind of a summary of those findings of that study.
Wasn't the property out 14 and 10 initially bought for that purpose, was it?
That was initially bought out there. I'm not sure what the future plans of that property. We do utilize that property for I think the water from the treatment plant, so the sludge that they'll spread on that property. I believe they do have someone that will hay that property. It's something the city's just been hanging on to. One of the challenges with that is water and sewer out to that property.
Right.
It'll take a significant amount of investment to get the water and sewer out to that property.
Complete street.
Oh, yeah, that's what these are. Do you want to talk about these?
Yeah, we can do that. So I just had two presentations. One was from I do
Good.
slide things in there and it's like, oh. Perfect. So I've gone to a couple trainings in the past couple months, so I just took a couple from those trainings and put them in here. One is on complete streets, and Jeremy's talked about this before, and I mean, I know Cameron has as well, but just And this, I will say, was presented and completed by Tammy Sufi. She works for Tool Design. And so she did just kind of like an overview of complete streets. Springfield had a training on complete streets and had it down on C Street, kind of showing how they implemented it in that area. So she just gave an overview about it. Basically, it's, thank you. Designing the street for all users, not just automobile traffic. And she kind of gave an overview of like, it can be for pedestrians, bicyclists, I mean, children, older individuals. So just thinking about all user groups within the city. And she was very specific about what they are not. So it's not just a one size fits all. Like you look at the street and you also look at the land uses by it, or what land uses you want to see, and then implement design standards for that. This are examples of what she sees as like common streets that we have, and just like how they're mostly geared towards automobile traffic. And then these are examples of what complete streets would actually look like, having it for bicyclists and pedestrians, I mean, sidewalk cafes. So these are all things that we want to see, especially in terms of like the downtown area, because there are many benefits. Like it does support the local economy if you get people out and feel comfortable walking around. And then also helps define the character, and it's a good way to do placemaking. They hit on pedestrian fatalities in Missouri. We are ranked 22nd in pedestrian fatalities in the United States. A lot of them obviously are in St. Louis and Kansas City area, but I mean, you can see Springfield and a couple in maybe in Ozark, but they disproportionately impact people of color, older adults, children, and low-income communities. And then this is a nationwide kind of by racial group of who gets impacted the most, and also by income range. So you can see there are more pedestrian fatalities based on lower incomes, and then it obviously goes down as you get a higher income range. But just in general, there are a number of benefits. You get better physical activity within your community, increasing, you know, personal health, but also increased vibrancy. You have less congestion, increased property values, more safety, you have more people walking around, and just opportunities to do placemaking. So making people want to come and actually walk around the downtown or any other part of the city. And then she kind of went over an overview of what the city can do in order to implement more complete streets policy. So you can actually do a complete streets multimodal policy, but guidelines, mapping the different types of streets, PR campaigns. So it kind of is like, these are all these things to be touched on in order to have a good complete streets policy. And these are the cities mostly, but some states have complete street policies. They range in like intensity, whether just to have resolution or to have something that has a little more teeth to it to actually implement it. But 46 communities in Missouri do have complete streets policies. And she emphasized it's a process, not just like, here you go, this is what we're going to do from now on, but looking at the type of streets, adjusting to the context, you know, there are always going to be trade-offs, and then just actually finalizing the design. So just making sure it's flexible enough that it can actually be helpful and applicable when you're going through developments. And there are a variety of things you can install to incorporate complete streets, medians, parking, driveways, site design, street trees. All these things like are just examples of what we can do. And I know Public Works and the city and planning try to do these things, but we also have issues at times with developers and with utilities and such. So it's a process that we have to go through. But she just kind of touched on importance of speed based on the rate of fatality at different speeds that people are going. So obviously it goes up as you increase your speed for likelihood of fatality or severe injury. And complete streets are designing the street in order to actually achieve a target speed rather than just the posted speed when people will tend to speed through it. So this was an example of just like a regular street could be anywhere. I think it was probably in St. Louis. But this is like one thing you could do is have a signalized intersection with signs and pedestrian walkway. And then kind of like the next step is to incorporate landscaping and a median as prioritized or a bike lane that's separated, just like encouraging people to actually use the street besides just automobiles. Kind of keeping that separation, especially for bicyclists, make them feel safer in actually using it. Yeah, no, she did a really good job on presentation. She knows what she's doing. So, and then these are just different opportunities for doing complete streets. So rearranging intersections. So it's just increasing the safety for all residents. She spoke very well about the corner radii. I'm not as well versed in that, so I won't try to touch on it, but doing curb extensions so that, you know, reducing speed and just allowing for more pedestrian flow as well. Well-maintained sidewalks is kind of a given. Having a median so you have a refuge if you're crossing. I know I would appreciate that on some of our streets. We do have another issue or kind of challenge is a lot of the main thoroughfares in the city are MoDOT owned and operated. So we can't just go out and redo Jackson Street and be like, we're going to do this and what we want. So signalized lighting, bike parking and landscaping and street art and such like that. So that was a quick overview of complete streets. And then this will be even quicker, but this was at the APA conference, which is the American Planning Association, the Missouri conference. They did an overnight placemaking. So basically, and it was done by Yard and Company and then Pocket Parks. Those were two companies that kind of were involved in it. But they design basically small, very manageable parks for different neighborhoods or companies who want to kind of improve the landscape. And they do it in a way that, you know, instead of just planning and then, you know, preparing and then developing, they do it kind of in a more incremental thing where they plan, they kind of start something up, readjust as needed, and then continue the development. So so this is kind of the beginning. So they started a pocket park. So it was, this is what it was to begin with. It was just a vacant lot in downtown St. Louis. People threw trash away and let their dogs use the area just for whatever and didn't clean up after themselves. So they were contacted and they actually like took it and transferred it into a pocket park that people actually want to use. So they kind of keep it pretty small, manageable, so the neighborhood can actually take it over or they can continue to kind of keep it up for them. And they do it through tactical urbanism, which they define as a low-cost temporary change to built environment, usually in cities, intended to improve local neighborhoods and city gathering places. And these are kind of the main goals of it: health, safety, happiness, connectivity, and vitality. And they kind of have a number of different ways that they attack a problem. So they first define what the purpose is, what does the neighborhood want. They do outreach to kind of figure that out. Identify like the most ideal location to incorporate a park or a community space. They definitely work on keeping the cost low. What's the highest feasibility for the park, and then just trying to ensure the longevity of it. So these are a few things that they do in order to kind of create the park, is be flexible, add value, keep it simple, but make it somewhere that people want to actually go. And so this in the top left corner was the vacant lot originally. And so they just did a very basic mural, something that they could actually do. I think they eventually ended up getting a ladder and making it a little bit bigger, but they started with like picnic tables and just cleaning it up, and then they slowly added mulch. I think they kept it, I think, with some donations under $5,000 total to do that. And this was before they actually got the completed project done, but they put shade structures and they had a welcome sign, and then they also put more landscaping and streamlight. So basically what they ended up doing was creating a space that people wanted to go to. People would eat lunch there, people would do yoga there and such. So they like cultivated a community space, not just a space itself. So, and then there's just a few other examples, they're in your packet, but they kind of created some spaces by taking up parking spaces and just make it a place for pedestrians to sit down and enjoy themselves. And it's called Parking Day. I'm not too familiar with it, but I think it's a pretty popular thing. And then this was a two-step process, a Cortex Innovation District. They hired them to do a really low budget project. And so they ended up planting sunflowers, but people would come out and take pictures. And it was popular enough that like they gave them a decent larger budget. And so they made this kind of nature path that actually had art sculptures in it. And it's pretty popular now as well. And then here's just a couple more, and kind of making pedestrian infrastructure a little brighter, as well as a little bit more safer as well, because it's a little more visible, and just kind of making new spaces out of maybe old parking lots and then making festivals around them as well. So that's the two presentations I found the most interesting. So,
And then something to kind of go in conjunction with that, we are actively working on or looking at it. Doing some research on that now to help encourage that, invite that in the city to create these public spaces, and then maybe just to brighten up the day or make it a more inviting area for the public to attend.
You think the schools, we have some really good artists in high school. I'm sure that we could the schools trying to get better with but I think that we would definitely have some kids in the school that could help with that.
Yep, we haven't really talked in much detail about that, but one of the things that in working with the city attorneys that they're working on is the rights of the artwork. It gets pretty tricky, I guess, that if someone sprays a wall and you cover it up, and there is a copyright concern there of artwork. And so there is actually a court case on that. So that's something they're researching more about, that the ownership of the art. And then also trying to figure out a way to maybe pre-approve artists, so we kind of know what could go in and where it goes. But yeah.
The question about our square.
Yep.
That I get asked a lot. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that can be done about parking